Okay, everyone, welcome back. Today we have Diane with us today, and we're going to talk about SEO. What exactly is SEO, and especially how it applies to us on Substack. So, a lot of us just use Substack notes and things like that to grow our audience, but we also have the ability to gain subscribers through organic traffic if we can get a little bit of a handle on SEO and terms like, or the technical term would be fulfilling user intent, if I remember correctly. So Diane's here to talk to us about this because I'm just a newbie in learning things like that. I have a little bit of knowledge, but not a lot, and Diane has a lot. So we're going to pick her brain. So let's get started. Diane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
So let's talk a little bit first about kind of generally what we should be thinking about when we think of SEO, and which is search engine optimization, and how that applies to content creators.
So, one of the things that I like to say, I had a friend who was a little bit too literal and would say, SEO organic. What does organic mean? Is it part of chemistry? I'd roll my eyes and say, well, really, what we're talking about is earned readership, right? And to earn something, you have to work at it. So I like to, and I would put that in my missives when I was writing reports internally. It was like we're earning these readers, right? Because we're investing in what it takes to make things happen. So it's not magic. There's actually an effort behind it. Um, and there's a couple of things that some core principles around search engine optimization. The idea is Google has created this EAT, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for. I should have remembered, but before I or looked it up before I came on. But this idea that it's about experience, trust, authenticity, um, and the idea that if Google is going to send people to you, it wants to know that you are giving a truthful, accurate, authentic um, answer, and that the engagement itself on your page is a good experience. So Google's brand is associated with giving a good user experience, and so it's not going to send traffic to a site that's just a bunch of spam and so on. It's looking for somebody who really knows the subject quite well. So, and Google's always tweaking its algorithms over time, and it decided that it wasn't enough to just have people go to one authoritative uh, piece on a site. It wanted to know that you really understood the subject matter and therefore had clustered a number of different articles around those topics. So it's looking at density of topic, or they call them topic clusters, and then breadth across your site and depth within an actual article itself. There.
Yeah.
And then on top of all that, it starts giving clues by the URL that you choose, right? The title tag that you choose, and then the description throughout, as well as if you've emphasized those terms using some of the headline tags that are there. So I've just given you a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm probably confused everybody who's listening. The point is there's a science. It's like a dark art and a white art, okay? And we're going to get into a little bit of both here.
Yeah, so let's take a look first at Substack specifically with SEO. So, um, one question that comes up a lot with my clients is, so I have a .substack.com. Is that going to affect how much organic traffic I get? Like, does Google or search engines prefer just the basic domain and not a subdomain?
Uh, I'm not sure I'm following the
So if,
question.
for example, for say a blog on herbs, say I have herbs with Adrian.substack.com versus herbswithadrian.com, would the .substack.com have a lesser ranking than the .com?
It does have a lesser ranking. It's not terrible, but it does have a lesser ranking. The closer it is to the primary domain, yeah, the greater the emphasis. And I'll give you a great example based on what you just said. One of my clients wrote a book on AI powered search. And as soon as he launched the site, AI powered search, it was coming up number one or two because it was the domain aipoweredsearch.com. Now, people had been writing about AI powered search. Yeah, I've written articles on AI powered search that I was optimizing for AI powered search, but it would be some other domain and then the blog slash and then the rest of the URL. So as close as it is to the very beginning, yes, that gets a higher ranking.
Okay. So for some people to whom like organic traffic and search is super important for their topic, they may actually um, see perhaps an increase in traffic if they get a custom domain versus the .substack.com.
It particularly if the custom domain is a descriptive domain like
Ah,
yours is. My
right.
Mine is Musings of a Storyteller, which if people are looking up storyteller, maybe that helps. But you've got herbs in your title, and that's what you're writing about, so that makes perfect sense.
Right.
That should help you.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about, so that's kind of talking about the URL, which is for your entire publication. But now let's talk about what we need in each post to make sure that we're being found by the people we want to find us. So Substack has several things in place for SEO, one of them being like the SEO box in the settings of each post. And in that, they have what they call the SEO title, the SEO description, and then your URL. I'm always telling people check your URL slug in that box. It's really important. Why would that be important to people?
Okay, and of course, like all my answers, it's going to be a long one.
It's all good.
I'll try and make it sort of fun so that they can follow along. Um, when people are looking for any piece of information, I mean, think about the last time you searched for something, um, anything. You start off your searching on Google at a very high level. Like, what is it I'm talking about? If I'm interested in herbs, for example, like what are healthy herbs? I mean, I don't know, right? So I'm going to start off like the what is it? And they tend to be all your W's, the what, who, where, why, how, which is not W, but you get the point. That's your high level informational type of knowledge that people are looking for. Google right now is generating a lot of that informational knowledge, and people aren't necessarily clicking through because it's already generating what is a car? So people aren't necessarily going to click through if you write something very generic like, what is a car? But if you say, this is how a car works, this is why you need a car. Is why a car will help you in your life. This is the expense associated with the car. All of those other things are further down your knowledge funnel. You already know what the car is. Now want to know what the upkeep is. You want to know how it you need to know more information, but how it relates to you personally. And so those personal things come out. Think of a restaurant near me. So they tend to have prepositions in it, near me, with a child, things like that that sort of become more descriptive of what my need is. The closer to what my answering the question about my need, the closer your piece of content you've got to sort of get in the mind of your audience, which you should be doing anyway as writers. You should be thinking in terms of what is it my people want to know. And if you're going to write something very generic that, herbs are good for you, then you might want to think in terms of, well, here's other stories I should be doing after that one that talks about it from this more personal more specific way, answering those questions that a person is going to ask before they make a transaction, whatever that transaction might be. And if you're selling classes on how to be an herbalist, that's the eventual transaction you want them to take, or you're trying to sell them herbs, that's the eventual transaction. So they might say, well, what's better for you? Is it curcumin or is it something else? Should I be using red rice or green rice or purple rice or whatever it is? And so you want to do those types of comparative ones, because that's what another thing that people do. So they figured out, oh, I want to go to an Italian restaurant near me. Which one is better? Which one is cheaper? Which one has better reviews and rankings? So you want to write content that addresses some of those things. And when you do, that should be reflected in your URL.
Okay. Yeah. I think part of the issue sometimes with Substack is the eventual transaction we want is that just that they'll subscribe to us to hear more of what we have to say about whatever topic we choose to write about. So,
I think that's a true statement. You want people coming back, and that's one of the reasons why earning traffic on Substack is a little tricky. But I have found that certain subjects, I'm a generalist, so I write whatever mood hits me on a given week, and I tend to write it with humor and heart and, maybe a current event type thing. But if it's a current event, it's going to be handled by some big publication. Um, but I'm also working on I have a book project in the works, and that book project is around a specific person who's not well, um, who had not been well researched and well written about. And so as I'm writing about her, I am finding that I'm getting traffic to her. It's minuscule, but that's part of a different problem. I've got to get, she needs to be known in order for people to be looking for her. But people who are looking for her are starting to come through me, which is exciting. And I'm getting people to the site through both looking at my essays, which are coming up now high, but also through images, which is something else that you should consider. And
yeah,
we
talk
can
to us a
talk
bit
about that
about
too.
images in your blog post and how that can affect SEO.
So when you put an image in, there's those little three dots at the corner of the top of an image. And if you click on that, it asks you what the alt tag is. And that's where you should be putting something very descriptive up about whatever the image is, especially if you took the picture. And that might be something, maybe you took a picture that doesn't have anything to do with the post itself, but you took a picture of looking out on Lake Michigan at sunrise. Somebody might be looking for a picture of Lake Michigan at sunrise from a specific vantage point. Put all of that in there. There's nothing that says an alt tag has to be 2 words. The more descriptive, the idea being that person who is visually impaired is now going to hear what this description is. So describe it. Describe it in 1, 2 sentences, whatever you want. I have found that Substack is a little touchy, so sometimes I write that in a note and then I copy it in there because I find it just
Mm.
erases it, or the little window closes before I finish it, and then that's annoying. But you may find that, someone who likes an image about Michigan, Lake Michigan, is going to like your essay, because especially if it was something esoteric about, being outside in nature. They might find themselves, they'll see the image, they'll click through. So Google will show the image, they'll click through and they'll read your post.
Right. And can you talk to us a little bit about headlines versus um, title tags? Because a lot of times we want to write catchy headlines that we can then share to notes and people will see it and click on it because it looks interesting, or like not, maybe not quite clickbait, but that kind of idea. But that's not necessarily applicable to what we're actually writing about as far as content goes. Um, so can you talk to us a little bit about how we tweak that for search?
Yeah. So I would think of your headline as being something that is visually seen. It's pushed out there, like you said, in notes, and somebody goes, "Oh, that's interesting. I want to click through to it." It's compelling, it's catchy, it's clever, and people want to click through. Um, a title tag is something that a machine is reading, right? Machines tend to be very literal. So it should be what this is literally about. And if it's comparisons, then put the word comparison of herbs, of types of herbs or whatever. You don't want it to be too terribly long, 60 to 70 characters. Um, think in terms of, 8, 10 words max. But it's what appears on a Google search page. I use Google as a generic for any type of search engine. It could be DuckDuckGo or Explorer, whatever. When you get onto that search results page, that title tag is what's there, plus the meta description underneath it. So think of that as like an ad. You're seeing this and you've looked for something very specific. Is it better, what kind of the best hiking shoes in February in Alberta? Something very specific. And it's going to show me, or it's going to give me a list of links. The closer that title tag matches a person's search intent to find a pair of hiking boots in a specific climate, the more likely it is that it will rank. And then that little meta description underneath it, if you don't write it, Google will write it. And again, this is your chance to be a little clever in the meta description because that's your tease. You want the warmest boots that are going to keep you from, keep you interested in hiking, whatever your tone is
Yeah.
on your site. That's what you put there. And hopefully people will click through because of it.
Yeah. And you're using title tag and meta description, which is kind of the technical terms. On Substack specifically, they call it the SEO title and the SEO description, which is in the post settings. But just for the people watching, that's where you find that. Um, so what are some other, I know we talked about images and those are kind of like that SEO box versus the headline that you want the people on Substack to see. What are some other like tips that you have for crafting your article in a way that can answer what your audience is looking for? For example, using headings perhaps, or things like that that would catch the eye of Google, so to speak, and get you into the
Right.
rankings.
Well, and you just nailed it. It's the headings on within your prose. So let's say you want to have a title of an H2 tag. So your title is usually your H1. H2 would be a sub a subset of that, and then H3, 4, 5, 6. So you can go down as, to whatever. But basically what it's saying to the machine, remember this is a machine reading this, not just a human being. The humans are seeing the display and it's got to make sense to humans, but it also needs to make sense to the machine. And the machine is going, oh, this is important. This is an H2 tag. This is an H3 tag. Um, this is, and you might touch on some of these topics like what is at the very beginning. A lot of times when I'm framing things in a B2B setting, or consumer setting, and I'm writing a blog, let's say, I might say, let's take a step back. What is blah, blah, blah? And I'll make that a title tag. I'll use an H2 to say what is AI, for example, or what is SEO. And then you might have subtitles underneath that. And again, you would just indicate that's a, subtitle 3. I don't go beyond 3. Um, and again, there's that hierarchy of information that Google is seeing and making a determination about whether or not you are authoritative on this subject. Again, that's your breadth of information or your depth of information. And then your breadth would be, do you have other stories? And if you do, you should link between them. Because again, that's telling Google from a great experience, I wrote about, and don't say this post and make that the link. The link should be something that describes that page, because that anchor text, they call that the anchor text. Um, I wrote about how to choose a herbologist. Choose a herbologist should be your anchor text that you highlight and make that the link to take it to the other, because that's what that other page is about. So you should use real words, real descriptive words to get you there, not this
Not click
post or
here.
I did. Now, if you're doing it to a third party, don't give them don't give them the lift. You can say this post then. It's when you're referring to yourself that you want to use the descriptive words. Don't push that swagger off to total strangers.
Right.
Keep it within your own
Do you
stories.
have, speaking of linking towards your own post, Substack has those pretty pictorial links that they do. Does that do anything for SEO, or would you use those or not really?
I haven't noticed. I took everything and I did throw it into Google Analytics, and unfortunately my traffic is so low on Substack, or not high enough. I shouldn't say so low, but it's not high enough for me to have enough data to really
Right.
understand. I can see some people are coming through on these different links. I'm always surprised when I see people coming in through Google, and I can't see where they're going. I haven't, I don't know Google Analytics well enough to be able to, you have to have somebody on who really knows that.
Right, right.
Tells me how to configure it. But I do know, like from looking at the sources, I do know people are coming in or organically. I'm earning it. I think it's the images. I do think it's the images, but I don't think it's necessarily the image that shows up in that little, you
Of the
know,
thumbnail image.
thumbnail. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that those are just the links about a given topic, and try and get people to continue through. I don't know if they are doing so or not. I think I'd have to put tags on them as conversions, set them up as conversion tags to see if they're actually clicking through.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, it's a huge topic, hey, to try and like understand the depth of it. But even just, I think, as a general writer who just wants to increase traffic and kind of get some exposure, it sounds like if we take care of that SEO box and we make sure that what's in there is engaging and also machine readable, we do our alt tags and our headings. And then what about like the old-fashioned keywords in your blog post? Is that relevant anymore? I know there's been lots of SEO changes.
There's lots of SEO changes. Actually, what what it's looking for is how well you know your subject, right? So now what you'll find is if you are doing a story on AI, for example, it will look to see, have you used words like machine learning, algorithm, um, uh, data modeling, all these other words that sort of would fit into a semantic cluster around the topic that you're writing about. So again, and the person I am writing about is Leonora Berry, and she was in the Gilded Age. She was a labor activist. So I will use terms like labor activist, Gilded Age. Um, uh, she she was where she lived. So any I'm creating my own semantic cloud around the information. There were certain pieces of legislation she was active with. The Knights of Labor was a group she was active with. So I use these terms, and I will say to myself, oh, but do people actually know what the Knights of Labor are? Maybe I'll do an essay on that. Who were the Knights of Labor? And that becomes an essay where I can go a little bit deeper. And if somebody is looking at Knights of Labor, which is fairly obscure, right? You'd have to be digging into history. Um, I did one on tariffs in the fall because I saw this was going to be a subject, and she was very involved in tariffs, in analyzing the impact of tariffs. And this is back in the 1880s, right?
Mhm.
So 150 years later, what lessons learned from 150 years ago? I I was creating some SEO around that as well. I'll let you know if that actually, you can see these are not things that are at the top of anybody's. I bet you nobody listening is actually looking at any of the things I'm talking about. So it's a very discreet audience.
But I think that everyone has their own discrete audience. Like even like for me, I have two. I have Substack coaching. So I can talk about all kinds of things, but it's specific to people who want to be on Substack. And then same with the herbalists. I'm talking about alternative health, but then you nail it down further. And so in some ways it's good to niche down and then get the SEO traffic for that specific topic because I even struggle with that with the herbology because um, there are so many sites out there that cover this wide range that it's like, how specific do I need to go? What's missing that I can actually cover? Or how do I beat out like healthline.com? Like, that's not going to happen.
Well, one of the things you might do too then is create a persona in ChatGPT and take your essays and put them all into a single Word document, upload that one Word document into ChatGPT and say, I am, be your audience. I am, a person that's interested in XYZ or Z. And what is it I'm missing? What are the burning questions that are missing? And that might give you some great ideas for topics that you want to write about, or say, what are things that are people are starting to look for, and there's very little content out there. So that's a content density issue, right? And you can ask, and I'll tell you, it comes back. It's a really great assistant for just that type of purpose. But one of the things I was going to say to you, because you are doing these lives, is make sure that you're also um, optimized for video and your podcasts because you do all your voiceovers. And again, people looking at voiceovers, people looking at for video, people looking for images, you may pop up that way and you may pop up
Right.
more readily than even with your prose.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned ChatGPT. What are a couple of good tips for using, because we talked about using AI last time we met, using AI to kind of help you get a handle on all this SEO?
Well, one of the things that you could say or ask is, what are the 10 most common terms that are mentioned, are used when in the top ranking sites around this topic? And see what comes back and see, are you using them? Because I'll tell you what's really fascinating is we get wed to our own language in our head, and we often stop our vocabulary there. We're not incorporating other ways people say the same thing.
Hmm.
Um, and that can be really interesting. I work for a search engine company that was an AI search company. And I worked for several of them, and all of them did not use the term search engine on their site because they were pushing the concept of, we want to be relevant. If you need more relevance, in your solutions, and I'm like, but a human being is looking for a search engine to replace its existing bad search engine, or they're not going to buy, right? So, I mean, you have to use what a person is looking for. So, I think that's one of the things you want to do some research on. There's tools like Moz, SEMrush, Uber Suggest to find out what are people searching on when they want to know more about a given information. And you can find everything from like the questions they're asking. And that's another thing. What are the questions, what the burning questions people want to know about a given subject? There is so much false information right now. I would think that anything that sheds light on whether or not this is truthful or accurate. Is it true that this occurs? I mean, those are types of things people are asking. Are vaccines good or bad? Here's an answer. Yeah, those are the types of things if you're touching on. I would think that would be angles that you might be able to um, address in a compelling way, with some, and I think you mentioned one of your clients is in meditation.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I was watching something this morning, and this woman said, you cheat yourself if you don't, when you go to yoga class and you don't take it right to the end, just lay there and enjoy that, just peaceful moment of tranquility. I can't remember what she called it, but whatever she called it, that would be something that if you were into teaching meditation, that you might want to address, is the fact that people, why do they stop before they can totally relax? What's the advantage to being totally relaxed? Those types of questions, and then optimize accordingly.
Hmm. Yeah, this is great. I know we could keep going because this is such a huge topic, but I want to kind of keep it simple and understandable and not get too deep in the weeds because it's easy to do when it comes to things like search engines and stuff. So, do you have any final tips you'd like to share? Do you think we covered pretty good for Substack users today?
Yeah, I think oh, I did there was one more thing I wanted to mention, is when you're creating your URL, let's say your site is about herbology.com, something up close to the .com before the .com. You do not need to use that word again in
Mm.
the after the slash. So you can save your characters, because you can't have super long URLs, but you can save, or you can have super long ones, but the closer they are to the .com, that's what really, after a while it truncates the rest of it. But you don't need to repeat it. And you shouldn't repeat them between your stories. You can, look for different ways of, don't put them in the same order, put them in different orders. I noticed this years and years ago. I had a site, and people would look for a blue contemporary couch. And I noticed that if you took contemporary couch blue, that got different people than blue contemporary couch. So I would change them up, even if a different products descriptions. I was just changing up the order, and it did make a difference. So you can replay the same words, just not in the same order.
Yeah.
And if you want to test it out, go to Google and look something up in one order and then change it, and you get totally different listings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
So it's fun. Thank
All
you. Thanks
right.
for having me.